Well, tonight we now dig once again and we revisit a topic that has certainly stirred up a lot of controversy. I'm talking about hydrofracking. And right now the stakes really couldn't be higher. On one hand, you've got gas companies airing spots on primetime TV. You've seen probably a few of them saying that hydrofracking will go a long way in helping solve the energy crisis and putting Americans back to work, energy independence. Now, you've heard the president who believes that natural gas is a pretty good idea.
We have a supply of natural gas that can last America nearly 100 years. The experts believe this will support more than 600,000 jobs by the end of the decade.
Okay, so you've heard the commander-in-chief, and you've also heard the chief executive in New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo, who walked into office saying, let's get on with this already. And on top of that, there's people who claim the health consequences of hydrofracking are so severe it contaminated their water, forcing them to deal with disastrous health issues. Now, you might remember we covered a lot of this ground during our special that we aired in February. We assembled some leading experts, environmentalists, and even a few famous faces to help us separate both fact from fiction. Well, now there are some new concerns that we're going to be talking about this evening. Latest news affecting some of the folks that we met in Dimmock, Pennsylvania, what's now become known as kind of ground zero for hydrofracking. And our reporter, Kim Lengel, she spent some time not only in Dimmock here, but she's been following up the story, and she's got more for us.
Yeah, Rich, and you know, Dimmock has become a town so divided over gas drilling that two sides describe the fight as a civil war. When we visited a few months ago, we met with residents living along Carter Road. They blame Cabot Oil and Gas for contaminating their drinking water. It's been a 3-year battle both in and out of courts, but the EPA, which published their final report on Dimmock's water quality about a week ago, said test results, quote, did not show levels of contaminants that would give the EPA reason to take further action. This latest news has made the industry pretty happy, but folks who were already suspicious of regulators say they're left with virtually no option. As the debate rages on and New York State draws closer and closer to issuing the first fracking permits, protesters have picked up a surprising ally in the fight against fracking.
This is a week old after the EPA has said that this water is safe to drink. Take a good look at it.
Thrusting a gallon-sized container of what protesters called Dimmock water, actor turned anti-fracking activist Mark Ruffalo told fellow protesters that New York State must learn from the pitfalls they say Pennsylvania made by allowing the state to be fracked.
If the gas industry were ever honest, if they would ever own up to the problems that they've created, there would be probably a little light at the end of the tunnel. But why they haven't is more of an interesting concern. If they could do it safely, I promise you they would. They can't make money and do it safely.
The actor has lived for many years with his 3 children under the radar in sleepy Sullivan County between the Catskills and the Delaware River, prime fracking territory. His stand against hydrofracking has cost him part of his private life, a luxury he says he's willing to live without in order to get answers.
Why is it incumbent upon us to prove that they're hurting us? Why is it not incumbent upon them to prove that they're not? And that's where we've got switched around. That's why I doubt that this could ever be done safely. And that's why we're asking for a ban.
I think there's some people who really believe that hydraulic fracturing is an evil, but I don't think they're really giving it a fair shake.
Tom West is an Albany-based attorney representing drilling companies such as Chesapeake Energy. The company is fighting its way back from its lowest stock price since 2009, a cash crunch worse than expected, and a loss in public confidence since its chairman was forced to step down. Still, Tom West says some people just don't belong in this debate.
They believe all the myths that they're told about water pollution, air pollution, that we can't do this safely, and it's unfortunate. And if you don't have the facts on your side or the science on your side, you hire a movie actor. You get a movie actor to volunteer his or her time to create a theatrical event out of it, and that's really what we have. It's unfortunate.
How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, it's classic. The other side always, you know, kind of tries to discredit or make personal attacks on the people who are fighting them. It's a sign of intellectual dishonesty. It's just a very blatant show of how little they have to stand on.
It's fight or flight.
Susquehanna County homeowner Rebecca Roeder has been contemplating whether she'll stay or move. She drove close to 200 miles from Dimmock to attend the rally at the Capitol with her daughter.
For me, it's always been that. It's fight or flight because I have that option. I don't have to stay, but I'm committed to a long-term fight.
We met 7 homeowners during our trip to Dimmock a few months ago, and Rebecca was one of them. Now, out of the 7, 2 of the families have since moved out of the region, saying they feared for their children's health. Here's a sneak peek at their stories, which we have on our website. What do you say to a prospective buyer when you're showing the house?
Well, if someone was looking to buy
do you say, and here's our lovely hydrofracking rig? What do you say?
Even to renters, I say, you know, there's a well pad right there, and they're going to build a compressor station. I'm not going to hide it. I mean, you know.
Yeah, you can.
You know.
It'll poison the whole world.
I try not to candy coat things for my kids, you know. I mean, they're real issues. They need to be talked about.
To see more of our story, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/RichardFrenchLive, and click on our specials tab. Now, while there are no hard figures on the number of residents who are packing up and leaving, local newspapers in recent months have been picking up on the trend and citing what they call a growing number. Rich.
All right, Kim, thank you. And let me bring in our panel here. You know Republican State Senator Greg Ball, and he is on record as opposing hydrofracking. We're also joined by David Braun of New Yorkers Against Fracking, and Nancy Schmidt, industry proponent, who not only has background in chemical engineering, the science of fracking, but also knows the economic background of the business. And we'll get into the dollars and cents on hydrofracking next segment. But Senator, let me start with you and give us a progress report, or at least a status check on where hydrofracking is in New York. We're still waiting for the results of that study that we haven't yet gotten, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually pushing to make sure that we have a moratorium. In the previous budget, there was zero funding for the manpower necessary to properly regulate the industry. So we would like to see the extension of a moratorium in this state. Quite honestly, it's very tough to get that bill to the floor in the Senate because of the powers to be. I have both a property owner bill of rights, which would push regulations on the industry, and a moratorium. Both, if they hit the floor in the Senate, would pass, and most certainly are being sponsored and would be passed in the Assembly as well.
Do you have the sense, though, that it's moving ahead here, or that it's kind of ground to a halt?
I'll tell you what's happening. What's happening is that, you know, this is a complex issue, right? And maybe there is a little bit of fact missing on both sides of the extremes, and then fact on both sides of the extreme. When you really look at it, the facts that are coming out, you have senators who used to be extremely pro-fracking that even now are saying, you know what, let's take a look at the science, let's take a look at some of the hardships that have been created in other states. And even in some upstate districts where they're pushing it on the job creation front, many of these senators now, who used to be totally 100% pro-fracking, are taking a step back. So if we could get the moratorium or the property owner bill of rights to a vote in the Senate, it would pass.
David, you know, one of the things I found, and Kim really organized the last special we had experts from all fields, including, we saw Tom West there. He was one of the people who joined us, plus leading officials, not just Greg joined us, but also from both sides, including industry. You talk to 10 people, you get 10 different answers. And I bet you for some of the lawmakers, there's real environmental or health concerns, but also there's concerns over PR. I mean, you have a guy playing the Hulk, okay, literally, who's making his way up to Albany. This has become a huge issue here. Is there a shortage, not just of consensus, but on fact that people can all agree to?
Well, I think the fact that we can all agree to is that generally the folks that are pro-fracking are the ones that are going to financially benefit in some way from it. And so the opposition that you actually see to it is a whole range of kind of independent people from academia. So we have experts such as Tony Ingraffia and Bob Howarth from Cornell University, or someone like Sandra Steingraber, who is a biologist, or Dr. Ron Bishop, or you know, other experts, or you have volunteers that, you know, someone like Mark Ruffalo, who personally is putting his life in somewhat of, you know, jeopardy to come out and spend so much time you know, working with people, but he's also just giving of his time. Why? Because he wants to make sure his water stays safe, and he wants to make sure that his home is something that is something he can return to and doesn't actually have to move away from. What we've seen in other communities is that these communities have been ripped apart. I mean, hydrofracking has been a complete failure in any place that it's been done. In places like Dimmock, where the people who have been victims victimized or treated.
But we've seen in Dimmock, though, because we went up there 1 second, though, and I want to bring Nancy, let her get a word in edgewise, too, that there isn't unanimity in Dimmock.
That's right.
A lot of folks that you talk to will get into the economic boon of it, but how about it in terms of from science? He's right. I've spoken to leading experts on both sides, some saying, the most conservative saying, it's still early. This is new science here. What they're trying to do in terms of the drilling is different than they've done in the past. We don't have enough of a sample to know both the short and even long-term consequences. Is that fair?
The drilling's not different than what we've done in the past. The thing that is different about it is that we're going vertical, we're turning a 90, and we're going out horizontal, sometimes a mile, sometimes 2 miles. But it's still the same drilling operation where you grind up rock and it's circulated to surface, and the hole's created, it's cased, and it's completed. So it's not a fundamentally different process. It's a longer well, but it's not fundamentally different.
I've heard, though, Nancy, that what's different about it, it's high volume, meaning that they're shooting more and more water and chemicals down the holes that they drill, and that's sort of what the difference is.
What the difference is because it is a longer well, sometimes extending out for 2 miles, as well as going 1 mile or deeper before it makes the turn. You have to use more volume, because the beauty of this technology is you can contact more of the reservoir from one single surface location.
It's upwards of 8 million gallons per frac, and 90% of that stays beneath the Earth's surface.
One thing for me is, if I want to make an informed decision on how I feel about it, why aren't I not able to get transparency on what these chemicals are? And so often, even at the table, I said, guys, just tell me what it is. Not that I'll understand it, but at least give me the list so that the proper people then can make an educated decision if this is a calculated risk worth taking. But still, you don't get transparency on what the chemicals are. That seems to be a legitimate concern.
There seems to be 2 ships passing in the night here, because industry is registering its fluids with frac focus. That's required in the state of Texas, and it's also something that's widespread voluntary industry practice. It's something that's going to be required for New York State. New York State has always known what the chemicals were. What they did not release were the things that were trade secrets.
Proprietary information.
So what is not disclosed is the trade secrets. Now, to the extent that those chemicals are necessary for the well, then that decision has to be made. But in terms of disclosure, almost all of it is disclosed. And in terms of the trade secrets, I believe that's something that we can come to some kind of agreement with, so that everybody's happy about this.
Can I just follow up?
I'm going to let you get the first word in as soon as we come back from break. And when we do come back, we're going to talk about a huge component of this, which is the economics. How much of an economic boon would it be for the state of New York here? And also, who's going to pick up a lot of the tabs? We're going to get into all of that right after this.